On this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly, Rapid7 makes a strategic integration. Should you use artificial intelligence in your enterprise to replace your workforce? What is your DDoS mitigation strategy? A big social media company sets out to create an open source project that will stick it to Cisco. And Amazon sucking it in the cloud, but not like that. All that and more, so stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. IT Pro TV offers 1,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video training content. Course topics include Certified Cloud Security Professional, Ethical Hacking, Cryptography, and VMware. You can stream their courses live or on demand to your mobile device, all for one low monthly subscription price and cancel at any time. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise security to upgrade your brain with the most popular IT certifications. Use the code ES30 for a free 7-day trial and save 30% off for life. Welcome everyone to Enterprise Security Weekly. Excuse me. I get so excited like I lost my voice there. Episode 21. This is November 3rd, 2016. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. On the lines via Skype is none other than Mr. John Strand, the founder of Black Hills Information Security and the CTO for Offensive Countermeasures. Welcome, John.
Hey, it's damn good to be back. It was Tokyo, Dubai, Brussels, then Washington, D.C., and then finally back home.
So I know. I was going to say you did a brief stint in D.C. there.
Yep. This is actually the first time I've ever circumnavigated the entire planet, so it's been pretty exciting.
Around the world with John Strand.
Around the world, exactly.
So just a couple of quick announcements. IT Pro TV has some updated training classes, Comp, TIA, Project Plus, DNS Tech Skills, Cyber Patriot, and more. Also, I just put out there the brand fresh, hot off the press, Security Weekly 2016/2017 survey. So if you listen to the show and you like the show or you don't like the show, send us some feedback. I got a survey. It's a short survey. It's like 13 questions. I collect no data that can be tied back to you. I don't want your email address. I don't want to know who you are. I just want to know a little bit about you anonymously, which will help us improve our show and grow as an organization. SecurityWeekly.com/survey. Please, please, please go fill out the survey for us.
Absolutely. And like I said, we're not trying to find anything sensitive about you, so completely ignore the first question of what are you wearing.
Yes.
Just ignore that one.
There's an open-ended question at the end. So if you can tough through the first 12 questions, in question 13, I want to be entertained, okay? I have high expectations for our listeners so that when I'm sitting around and I'm like, I need to be entertained, I can go look at our survey results and I want to laugh. So I'm putting that challenge out there to our listeners.
Very cool.
Let's dive into the stories for this week. Enterprise Security News kicks it off with Rapid7, who has integrated Nexpose with McAfee ePolicy Orchestrator, EPO, and DXL. What is DXL? Like DMX, but different. McAfee's going to give it to you. So mutual customers will have the ability to extend visibility into each asset in their network, increasing the ability to manage risk with automated response to threats, including malicious file infections. What's interesting is it says Nexpose prioritizes risk based on customer environments and attacker behavior, then streamlines remediation by aligning IT and other security workflows. It sounds like this is a play to increase the usefulness of your vulnerability data and really like relate it back to what's happening in your environment and other controls that might be in place. So
I got another question on this though. Do you know we constantly talk about agent creep? Do you actually see some of these vendors like with ePolicy Orchestrator, McAfee, and Rapid7 that they're basically trying to now start riding on top of each other's existing agents to reduce the number of agents in an organization and still get that type of visibility and the type of security features that customers are looking for? Because that's kind of how I started reading into this, is they're kind of riding on top of existing agents to do something cool, which I think it's actually a brilliant move.
Yeah, you get away from multiple agents being installed in the system into one giant agent being installed in the system that can consume all of the resources rather than 6 agents that all together consume all the resources but individually consume a little resources. That's my fear anyway.
Yeah.
The endpoint play in the enterprise is very interesting still to this day. I think it will be for some time because I don't think anyone's got it all figured out, right?
Not yet.
Here's a hot button one just for you, John. There's an article talking about cybersecurity artificial intelligence and talks about the rise in artificial intelligence and its usage in security products, which we've covered on the show. It states, first, the demand for cybersecurity professionals is outstripping the supply of qualified personnel as the number and severity of attacks are on the rise. Second, previously known attack types known as zero-day attacks are also on the rise. And artificial intelligence, apparently, they claim, or they're reporting that people claim, can solve the workforce shortage and zero-day attacks.
So Paul, I think my audio is a little bit choppy. I think you need to tell people the analogy, because you talk about it much better than I do, about chess, how artificial intelligence can actually really increase how effective a player can be with chess. I think that's a great story.
So world's greatest chess player, he's the Russian guy, I forget his name, right?
No, it's Sweden now.
Is Sweden now?
Yeah, dude, the guy is good.
Anyway, they took the world's greatest chess guy and they had him play chess against the computer. And the world's greatest chess guy wins, like all the time, right? It beats the computer. Mm-hmm. And then they took another computer and they put it up against that computer. And those results were kind of like mixed, right? Some, win some, lose some kind of thing. That's artificial intelligence. But when they took a mediocre chess player, that's probably a bad way to put it, but they take someone who knows how to play chess and they give them a computer and computer software, they will beat the computer every damn time.
Mm-hmm. And just for the record, because we know that we're going to get hate mail, the top-rated chess player as of right now is a gentleman by the name of Magnus Carlsen from Norway. And there are awesome videos of him going and playing those chess players in the park in New York City. Like they're really, really good at lightning chess and just destroying them in like 4 or 5 moves. But yeah, you couple artificial intelligence with smart people, and it's unstoppable. But if you're getting artificial intelligence to replace people in your organization, oh God, you're missing the entire point.
Yes. Yep. That was a good time. And what about zero-day attacks? That could actually, it depends on how it's implemented. We're not getting into details here, but the trend certainly seems to be to add the buzzwords of big data analytics and artificial intelligence and apply them to being able to detect zero-day attacks.
Well, and I have a lot of questions about how that actually looks. I mean, how do you effectively determine what is a zero-day? Are you talking heap spraying? You're talking buffer overflows? You're talking about format string attacks? You're talking about Java deserialization attacks, null pointer referencing attacks, integer overflows, integer underflows? It gets to the point where it's almost impossible. You try to define this thing as a zero-day, but there's so many different types of attacks that I think it almost becomes impossible to actually write something that can detect it in all scenarios. I do think that artificial intelligence can assist human beings in looking for non-standard traffic patterns, but no, the big thing about this article that I think is fantastic, and people have to look at it, is the funding. And you look at it, it's literally a list of a whole bunch of products that we talk about on the show all the time.
Yes.
Tanium and Cylance and Darktrace and Logarithm. And the amount of money that these companies are getting invested into them, oh my God.
Yeah, so
it is
clearly
absolutely crazy.
And one of the things that I've been looking at lately, John, is, we've done a series of interviews with Endgame, and really what I kind of pulled from that was there are really 3 different ways in which you can detect malicious behavior on a system, right? You can look at how the exploit is being triggered, right? That's one way. There are certain behaviors and things that happen when an exploit is triggered that if you had the right analytics, you could detect most of the time and not have it be exploit or vulnerability specific, right? So that's one area. The other area is the actual execution of the payload. So like once you do the exploit, there's the like triggering, like how you run the payload inside of memory, right? There are all kinds of techniques there, right? We talk about all the time, blockchain, whatever, right? So that's the second thing. But then the third thing is what the payload does once it's running. So maybe it dips into memory and it tries to pull Mimikat style the clear text credentials. Like that's a behavior that we can detect. So there's really three areas on the endpoint that I'm identifying. I think the vendors that can do all three are going to be in the lead. And I think the vendors that can figure all that stuff out and have a really high degree of detection capabilities in all three of those areas are the ones that you're going to want on your endpoint systems.
Well, and one of the things that's kind of been disappointing, we've talked about it on the show, we've talked about it on the main Security Weekly show, is are these products getting really good at detecting attackers? Are they getting really good at just detecting your general run-of-the-mill penetration tester? And that's something that's constantly bothering me. And the reason why it bothers me is with any artificial intelligence algorithm, you have to train it. And if we're training it using current penetration testing techniques, it's getting very good at detecting that. So for example, look at the TSA. The TSA is really, really good at detecting water bottles because they see that every day and they shut those things down. But whenever they actually have a real test where someone tries to send through an oddly shaped gun or anything like a knife, they tend to miss those things because they haven't been trained to actually find those things. So yesterday, I was at the Hackfest with Ed Scotus. It was a very good time. Had a blast there at Sands Hackfest. And I kind of wanted to break down a week in the life of Black Hills Information Security and some of the things that we encounter, Paul. And one of the slides was a Cylance bypass in 2 lines. You do MSF Venom, you put in your Windows x64 interpreter reverse TCP lhost, and you kick it out as a DLL file. And then you use run DLL32.exe to actually inject and run that dynamic link library. And that was able to bypass Cylance. And the reason why I bring this up is it's important for all of our listeners to understand that these tools are better than traditional blacklisting products, but they have to be trained properly. And the longer these tools exist, the better that they will get, but do not expect these tools to be an absolute silver bullet in all situations. Like I think we've said it a lot. We love Cylance, but don't think for 2 seconds that it is a complete end-all be-all of information security, regardless of whatever the hell their marketing says in every airport you go into.
Yeah, nothing's going to detect 100% of what's out there. So we talk more about some strategies that you can implement to supplement some of the endpoint protection, which doesn't come without its headaches too, as we've described. So,
absolutely.
DDoS attacks are on the rise. I have some
okay. So tell us before we get into this. Talk about Anycast DNS.
So this is essentially outsourcing your DNS to your ISP, right? And letting your ISP deal with the DDoS, who's likely much better equipped to deal with the DDoS. I mean, this isn't a new strategy. I found it interesting that this is what Flashpoint, right? They're the vendor.
That's Flashpoint.
Yeah.
Yep.
Flashpoint is recommending in this case, given that I know some people that work at Flashpoint and I know some of the research they've done into DDoS protections, which is one of the reasons why this story came to mind. And it's really just outsourcing your DNS. They're not recommending vendors that are out there selling DDoS protection software, which I think after Election Day this year and Black Friday this year, we might see an uprise in DDoS protection vendors as the basically variants of the Mirai botnet go around and try and take down the internet.
But you know, one of the things that's difficult about this, and everybody's looking at what happened with Dyn a couple of weeks ago. And full disclosure, we have some very good friends that work at Dyn. Chris Brenton and William Stearns are SANS instructors. And at some point, Paul, doesn't it just become an issue that there's just too much bandwidth that's being thrown at your organization? And is that even something you can defend against whenever you're talking about sustained levels like we saw a couple of weeks ago?
If I had to choose 2 people to protect the internet, and especially with respects to DNS, I think Bill and Chris probably be in the top of my list. So that
Bill
invokes
and Chris
confidence
without question.
In me. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, I saw some articles that were like, dying DNS is a bunch of chumps. And I'm like, no,
No,
no, no, no,
no.
they're
Actually, the
not
exact
chumps.
opposite. Yes.
and they
There's
did
some
it
of the
very
people
good.
that taught John and I a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
So and they continue to teach us stuff on a regular basis,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it's into an issue. We have a lot of vendors that are standing up and they're saying, well, we could have stopped this, and no, you couldn't have. The amount of bandwidth that was coming through is just it's just amazing.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting to leave it in the hands of your ISP was basically the recommendation there. I'm curious to see, looking ahead, what DDoS protection starts to look like, especially in the scenario that John described where there's just too much data coming at your organization.
Yep.
So I find this very interesting because it seems to me like large companies, especially social media companies, even large companies like Amazon, that are consumers of certain products have really kind of shifted away from, they're not buying from the HPs and the Ciscos of the world, right? I mean, maybe a little bit, but they're so distributed and consuming so much of the gear they need to run these gigantic networks that they're looking a lot at open source, right? I think we've had the conversation about what's the hardware behind AWS. It's like all different hardware. They're not buying from Dell or HP, right?
And that's kind of the Google model as well. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, Google does that kind of customized, hot-rodded hardware across the board.
Yeah, and I mean, that's essentially what Facebook is doing in here. So they've created essentially a switch capable of 200 gigabytes of data per second over fiber, and it's a white box design. And it allows customers to load, this is a quote from the article, load their own networking software on the device, setting it apart from products companies like Cisco, which are pre-bundled with proprietary management software. So they're just getting away from, I have to maintain a subscription, I have to take whatever software that vendor is giving me, and do all that, and they're just going to, well, you can just load whatever software you want on it. Now, this box, apparently in some testing, sent an enormous amount of data over like 30 kilometers and didn't drop one packet.
So it's kind of interesting. I was talking to a friend who worked at Facebook, and it's interesting because the way that they approach vendors is, if you have a vendor, you have a product, your product's cool, they will sit down and they will have a conversation of either A, we can purchase this product, or B, can we actually write something that does what this product does in the next 2 months? Mm-hmm. And that's awesome, right?
That's pretty cool.
They're actually sitting down and they're asking those questions. And I don't think that somebody like Facebook or any of these different companies are really wanting to be completely beholden to a vendor like Cisco. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, Cisco has had some really, really harsh sales practices over the past few years. I know of a couple of customers where Cisco's going head to head with two other vendors, and Cisco basically steps in and says, look, if you don't go with our products, we're going to do a software audit across your entire infrastructure to make sure that all of your licenses are up to date for all the products that are being used that are Cisco products already in your organization. That's really crappy tactics. That may, bully a customer into actually buying your product for the short term, but in the long term, it's just going to force companies like Facebook to come up with something, and it's like a total white box solution. You guys can install it. It's going to be much cheaper than anything with Cisco, and then they're going to come back and eat your lunch. Basically, what I'm saying is karma's a bitch, and it exists.
And I find it interesting how open source is really making its way into large enterprises. Small, medium, and large enterprises. The Facebooks of the world are the gigantic enterprises. But as we'll talk about in our segment today, about using Bro in the enterprise, a lot of enterprises, regardless of the size, are adopting open source. And I find it to be an interesting trend that we're starting to get away from some of these larger companies that make that really do things like they've been doing things for 20 years, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just not where we're at. I think companies want more control. I think that for large part, open source software has been easier to manage and at least just as secure as the commercial products that are coming on the market. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Linux is like awesome with security, because we've all seen the issues with Linux kernel security and things of that nature. And it's interesting, several years ago, maybe not similar, like 3 years ago, someone who I really respect, is very close in working in the open source community, doesn't work for any particular like big open source project, right? But says there's all kinds of issues in the Linux kernel and all kinds of vulnerabilities, and a lot of them just don't go addressed, or they get reported and never fixed. And then as we cover the news on Ball Security Weekly, I'm like, wow, there's another privilege escalation for Linux. I'm like, I guess that person was right. So certainly issues there, but I think it's a pretty cool trend. Okay. Amazon is making it easier for you to migrate to the cloud. The quote from the article is, for companies that rely on Windows or Linux computer servers running in their own data center, the server migration service was announced last week will theoretically make it easier to move those traditional big iron servers to AWS. The move comes just weeks after AWS and VMware announced a way for VMware, who's a big rival to Amazon, to run its data center software on, you guessed it, AWS servers.
Is this it? Are we throwing in the towel? Has Amazon just won the internet?
This is it.
Is that it?
This is it. I think they have. I think it's going to be obviously extremely difficult, even for a large competitor like Microsoft or Google, to compete with Amazon in the cloud right now.
I think out of everybody, Google could actually do it because they have enough money to actually do it. But Amazon is all in on this, and the products that they're coming up with it's becoming less and less politically feasible for a CIO or CTO to be running all this infrastructure on premises in their organization. So, man, it seems like every other week or every other month, Amazon comes out with something that's just awesome and making it really kind of reducing the barriers to actually move a bunch of your stuff to the cloud. But the big question, as we're always worried about, Paul, is this going to make organizations less or more secure? And that's the big concern.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about that issue. I'm sure we'll talk about that issue more in future episodes. I think that one of the issues surrounding cloud is obviously cost, and this allowing your migration to happen easier and supporting VMware essentially in the cloud. It makes it much easier and much less costly for organizations to make the move into the cloud. And as we know, John, in security, if something's cheaper, the fact that it may not be as secure becomes less and less of an issue.
Well, and the question I have for you, Paul, since you talk to a lot of people on this stuff, is what the hell is VMware getting out of this? Because I like from a migration perspective, partnering with somebody like Amazon, what do you think VMware's upside is for this one?
I think it's survivability. I think as VMware sitting there watching all of these data centers move to the cloud, and they're leaving the VMware environment and they're going to the AWS environment. So I think for VMware, it's like a last-ditch effort to say, don't leave us. Stay with us. Yes, host in AWS, but use us, use our software, and still collect licensing fees and have a business once everyone moves to the cloud. I mean, because let's face it, VMware has some awesome technology when it comes to virtualization, and cloud is just virtualization on someone else's servers. So why not make this move? I think it makes perfect sense for VMware. It's probably they're late to the party, but I think this is a good strategic partnership for them. Some people may disagree, but I think it's good for VMware.
Yeah, I do think that the more that you actually integrate effectively with other technologies, the easier it is to actually keep you in an organization. Like we go back to the whole Cisco thing that we were talking about a little while ago. If you're being proprietary, you're being kind of a bully, you're not playing well with others, it becomes very easy to kick your technology out and replace you with a vendor that's a little bit more open.
Well, and I think if you're sitting there as administrator of a big VMware environment and someone comes to you someday and is like, hey, you know what? We're just going to put this whole thing in the cloud. And you're like, what? Wait. I know all this VMware stuff like really well. Like now I have to go learn this whole new thing when you can say, well, I can just take the VMware architecture and implementation and put that in the cloud. And then I still have all my skills. I still have all my ninja skills, right? And they're just applicable in the cloud. So I think that furthers the decision along to move things into the cloud, because now we don't have to we don't have to fire our VMware team and hire an AWS team, which if you're going to hire an AWS team, I mean, those people really just don't exist in large teams that you can just go hire, right?
No. I mean, we put out that tweet trying to look for some assistance. We got one good person coming back for helping us out with Amazon Marketplace, but most people just haven't touched it. I mean, even Rich Mogul on some of the things he's having trouble keeping up with, like especially on the marketplace selling side. So there's some wicked ninjas out there, but this is moving very, very quickly. Yeah.
So I think this is good for everyone, to be honest with you. All right. With that, we're going to take a very short commercial break and come back and talk about using Bro in the enterprise.